So I've got a quick setup here to illustrate shutter speed. I don't have any moving objects or people around, so I'm working with my ceiling fan. I've set my camera up, pointing at it, fairly zoomed in to really show the blur when we get that. And I have my camera on TV for shutter priority. And basically what I'm going to do, since I can't actually show you the photos while switching between live and recording, I've taken the photos in advance. And I'm going to just switch to them so that you can see the settings on the camera in the playback mode along with the pictures going from a fairly fast shutter speed of a 500th of a second all the way down to 1 second. Now I should note that I'm at 800 for my ISO because I am indoors, so there is significantly less light. And at the far end of the spectrum, you get a little too dark on the really fast shutter speed and a little too bright on the slower shutter speed. And that's just because we only have so many stops worth of changing our aperture before we'd have to go in and change our ISO again in order to use that aperture and shutter speed balance. So here we go. Indoor. All right, so this, let me zoom in. This is a little dark because again, I'm using such a fast shutter speed that my aperture doesn't open up far enough. So this is definitely a little underexposed, but you can see the image pretty well. The fan is actually frozen nicely. And I'm gonna zoom back out so I can switch to my other images. 250th. I must have skipped 125, but here's a 60th, so you can definitely see it's a lot nicer, fairly bright exposure, and there's starting to be some blur in the fan blades. And then, okay, I'm going the wrong way is what it is. So here's my 250th, 125, 60, 30, 15, really getting blurry there, 8, quarter, half, and then there's a full second. And aside from seeing that semicircle at the bottom of the frame, the fan blades almost completely disappear. Note that this is kind of maxing out the shutter speed and the aperture on the brightness end, so it is getting overexposed now. When it comes down to shooting indoors, I find that there is a bit of a need for some exposure compensation. So I'm going to switch to my menu, and I'll show you that I'm actually overexposing all the frames by one stop in order to truly get a picture that is the brightness that I would ensure that I get a good amount of detail, ensure that it looks good and bright on the back of the computer screen. Just keep in mind that your camera screen may be set to a really bright setting or darker setting, and so you can't always judge the actual view of it. You should be judging the histogram, and that's why this view of the histogram works really nicely, so it can show you what is overexposed or underexposed. So I'm going to back off a little bit, and you'll see that while there is, and I'm getting these blinkies in the preview, those areas are not going to have detail, but otherwise my histogram looks better in this image. And when I go to that full 1 second, you can see it's pushing over to the right more than it necessarily needs to, and there's more areas of the image that are blinking. On the other hand, if I go down to that 250th of a second, you can really see that all the exposure information is in the left quarter of the image, basically. It's always better to have the histogram heavily weighted towards the overexposure without clipping than to be heavily weighted to the underexposure with or without clipping. And that's it.